and become so successful on our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation.
He's out of his mind. Out of his mind. He was so successful that his VP, Kamala Harris, was elected to office in a landslide because people felt like under Biden and Kamala Harris that their lives were getting better, not slowly declining year after year.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Ashley with Status Coup. Joe Biden, in his first interview since leaving office, told the BBC he doesn't think it would have mattered if he had dropped out of the race earlier, adding that he was just doing so well, his agenda was so successful that it was simply too hard for him to stop. So we are going to watch his interview with the BBC and talk about all of that.
I do fear a little bit, and I don't think it's been forgotten by the people. I think it's being forgotten by the leadership a little bit. Excuse my cough. The fact is that
I promise I am not trying to take a cheap hit at Biden for his age, but he made it all of like 8 seconds before coughing and betraying his, let's call it like, lack of fitness. This is someone who thought that they were not just fit for office, but the best that the Democratic Party had to offer. He could be sitting in the Oval Office right now. And, you know, we covered Bernie's Fight the Oligarchy tour through Pennsylvania last week. Bernie is 83. This man has more energy than most adults in any age bracket. Biden is younger than him at 82. So this isn't solely about age, more just like general ability to do the job that you are charged with doing. And again, Biden could have been serving out a second term right now. And I don't think that is great.
my father and mother's generation knew what was at stake. They knew that that democracy was literally hanging in the balance.
Okay, stopping again, sure. But I don't think you can really say that it's just that people don't fully understand or don't know like what's hanging in the balance. It's more that if this is what democracy looks like in 2025, the full picture of it might lead some people to conclude that democracy maybe doesn't work for them and maybe isn't worth actually saving at all. Yes, obviously our current president is hard at work with his Doge chainsaw, chopping up every bit of the democracy we have that he can. But I'm not convinced that our democracy was functioning as it should have been before then, according to a Princeton study from 2014. So somehow over 10 years ago now, America is an oligarchy, not a democracy. So here is the BBC article. Study: U.S. is an oligarchy, not a democracy. The US is dominated by a rich and powerful elite. So concludes a recent study by Princeton University professor Martin Gillens and Northwestern University professor Benjamin Page. This is not news, you say? Perhaps, but the two professors have conducted exhaustive research to try to present data-driven support for his conclusion. Here's how they explain it. Multivariate analysis indicates that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. In English, the wealthy few move policy, while the average American has little power. As they said, this doesn't really come as a surprise. And again, this is from 2014, this study, which predates Trump. So clearly, our democracy was not really a democracy before Trump and Doge and all of his cronies. And to our Democrats in office who seem to need to hear this over and over and over again, so sometime it might actually penetrate, this lack of a functioning democracy and people knowing that what you're trying to pass off as a functioning democracy really only works that way for the wealthy elites, maybe has something to do with why some people in this country chose not to defend it. Again, the thing that you were trying to pass off as democracy.
You know, the United States has never been able to avoid a war in Europe. And so one of the smartest things we did after World War II was we formed NATO. Because alliances provide security. Imagine.
Sure. Yes. Alliances provide security, and also they make sure that we have imperial partners and additional boots on the ground when we invade other countries under false pretenses like Iraq, and when other countries like, oh, I don't know, Israel maybe, need us to fund their genocide. Alliances provide security and also additional people to be used as cannon fodder to kill and wound other people who are just trying to live their lives. So yes, alliances provide security.
If we didn't have NATO now,
can you imagine it now? Because there are some people who fear that this Atlantic alliance, born in the Second World War, is now dying before our very eyes. Is that your concern?
It's a grave concern. I think it would change the modern history of the world if that occurs. Look, we are not the essential nation, but we're the only nation in a position to have the capacity to bring people together to lead the world.
Sure. That is all great. But before we try to bring people together to lead the world, can we maybe help out the people in our country who are starving, working themselves to death, bankrupting themselves due to for-profit healthcare, drinking poisoned water, and breathing poisoned air? How about East Palestine, Flint, and Moss Landing, or any of the other environmental sacrifice zones in this country? Maybe we should help out at home first, because if we can't fix our own problems, I don't know why anyone else would trust us to begin to fix theirs. I am just going to say this as many times as it needs to be said. Democrats, this is why you lost, because people in this country are struggling and you haven't offered them any kind of material relief. So people took a chance on someone who at least pretended to care and pretended to know their struggle. And now we are here with Trump.
Otherwise, you're going to have China and the former Soviet Union, Russia, stepping up.
You've talked about a great threat to democracy. Do you really believe that there is a greater threat now to democracy than at any time since the Second World War?
Yes, I do. Because, I mean, look at the number of European leaders in European countries. They're wondering, well, what do I do now? I mean, what's the best route for me to take? Can I rely on the United States? Are they going to be there?
You know what they're saying in this administration. The US Defense Secretary talks about European freeloading. The Vice President talks about your country, the United States, bailing out Europe. There's an anger there. Have they not got a point?
No, they don't have a point. Look, imagine there being no NATO. Do you think Putin would have stopped at Ukraine? Do we think Putin would have stopped anyway, I don't understand how they fail to understand that there's strength in alliances. There's benefits. The cost there, it saves us money overall.
Let's turn to Ukraine, can we? Because you compared the war in Ukraine with the Second World War. President Trump is now saying, look, if you want peace, Ukraine is going to have to give up some territory. Some people think that is common sense to say that. Do you think it's not common sense? It's perhaps modern day appeasement?
It is modern day appeasement. Look, listen to what Putin said when he talked about going from Kyiv into Ukraine.
I mean, this is all kind of painful to watch. Biden isn't wrong here, right? When he's talking about Putin and Ukraine, it is unlikely that Putin will just stop at Ukraine and, if undeterred, won't attempt to recapture other former Soviet countries next. But there is more to the story. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the US and NATO offered assurances to Russia that they would not move any further east than East Germany. And NATO has obviously failed to keep their word. And going back on your word isn't great when dealing with extremely sensitive geopolitical issues. Some might take that as a provocation. It is almost as though NATO helped to create the conditions that brought about the very thing that they were supposed to be protecting against. Does this excuse Putin from waging war on Ukraine? Of course it doesn't. People are dying because of the imperial interests of the state. But the how we got here in this case has more nuance, as it always does.
And why? He can't stand the fact that the Russian dictatorship that he runs, that the Soviet Union has collapsed. And And anybody thinks he's going to stop is just foolish.
What did you make of those scenes in the Oval Office? President Trump and President Zelensky?
I found it sort of beneath America, the way that took place. And the way we talk about now that, well, it's the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah. What the hell is going on here is a very clear way to talk about what's happening right now. So maybe Biden should have dropped out earlier to stop Trump's fascist takeover. Maybe we should have been able to have a democratic primary process, since this is the thing that they keep telling us they care so much about.
What president ever talks like that? That's not who we are. We're about freedom, democracy, opportunity, not about confiscation.
I can hear your passion. I can hear your anxiety that the world is changing
This is what passes for passion now. That is pathetic.
the way it has. And for a long time you believed, you said, I'm the man who can stop Donald Trump. And you did once. And in the end you withdrew from that election campaign at the last minute. It's a question you know lots of people ask you, Mr. President. Did you leave it too late? Should you have withdrawn earlier, given someone else a bigger chance?
I don't think it would have mattered. We left at a time when we had a good candidate. She was fully funded.
They had a good candidate and she was fully funded. I think that kind of gives lie to the whole thing, her being fully funded.
I had become what we had set out to do. No one thought we could do. And become so successful in our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation.
He's out of his mind. Out of his mind. He was so successful that his VP, Kamala Harris, was elected to office in a landslide because people felt like under Biden and Kamala Harris that their lives were getting better, not slowly declining year after year. People felt like Democrats had offered them more than crumbs and concrete policy to address their material struggles, because that's what matters to most people. People want to have the ability to feed themselves and their kids and their families, to have a roof over their heads, to not be working 2 jobs just to be barely scraping by, if at all, to feel like their kids are going to do better and have more opportunities than they have had, to be able to take care of your medical bills, to have all of your, regular bills paid at the end of the month, and maybe have something left over to do something nice with friends or cover an emergency if something does happen to come up. To have enough to just live a life in the wealthiest country in the history of the world and not feel like the only ones thriving here are the wealthy elites. Oh no, wait, that's not what happened. Harris was not elected because he and the Democrats, instead of doing any of those things or putting in policy that would make it so that people can do those things, they abandoned the $15 minimum wage, which in 2025 means kind of nothing. They abandoned a public option for healthcare. They moved to the right after his surprisingly good COVID relief bill, from Democrats anyway. His big infrastructure deal actually wound up being a privatization scheme that sold off much of America's infrastructure to private companies. He didn't fight Manchin and Sinema to expand the child healthcare credit, which was overwhelmingly popular. He didn't fight Manchin and Sinema to extend the child tax credit, which was overwhelmingly popular. The IRA, his historic climate bill, the only climate bill, has amounted to tax credits for companies to move toward clean energy, which is something that would have been helpful like 30 plus years ago. But when the planet is already on fire, it basically is just like bringing in a suburban garden hose to try to put the whole thing out. In a word, it is useless. During a once-in-a-century pandemic, his and the Democrats' big idea on healthcare was expanding COBRA, which, if you've never been on COBRA before, is wildly expensive and a for-profit health insurance scam. And after George Floyd was lynched on camera, he gave the police $32 billion. The Democrats left an opening for Trump twice. and we are all now paying for it. So thank you guys for watching. Please do like, follow, and subscribe to Status Coup News. And if you can, please do consider becoming a supporter so that we can keep bringing you reporting like this that matters to working people. And you can do that at statuscoup.com/join. And I will see you in the next video.